Johnny Carson had built his legend on control. For 3 decades on American television, he was the calm center of the night, the man who could make a nation laugh no matter what chaos the day had delivered. Presidents sat across from him, movie stars leaned on his desk, comedians waited nervously for his approval, and through it all Johnny never cracked. Not during wars, not during assassinations, not even during his own divorces and private losses. He smiled, delivered the joke, tapped his pencil, and moved on. That composure was not accidental. It was armor, carefully constructed over a lifetime, and by 1983 it seemed unbreakable. No one watching that Tuesday night in March could have imagined that the strongest blow to that armor would come not from tragedy on the world stage, but from a small girl sitting quietly in the third row, holding a gift wrapped in paper covered with hand-drawn stars. March 15, 1983 began like thousands of Tonight Show tapings before it. NBC's Burbank studios buzzed with their usual rhythm, cables coiled neatly across the floor, crew members checking lights, producers glancing at clipboards and watches. Doc Severinsen's band warmed up, brass notes echoing softly through the studio. Ed McMahon stood ready, his voice already primed to boom Johnny's name to millions of homes. The audience filtered in, laughing, chatting, unaware that they were about to witness something that would become legend. Johnny Carson himself followed his familiar routine, arriving late, greeting no one, slipping into the protective bubble that allowed him to perform without letting the world get too close. He had no idea that a 12-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell was sitting just a few feet away, her small hands gripping a gift that represented 4 months of hope, love, and quiet determination. Sarah's journey to that seat had not been easy, and it had not been ordinary. She was born in Columbus, Ohio, with Down syndrome and a severe congenital heart defect that doctors warned would shape every year of her life. Hospitals became as familiar to her as playgrounds were to other children. Machines beeped through her nights, needles marked her days, and pain was a companion she never remembered choosing. Yet everyone who knew Sarah spoke of her smile first. Her parents, Elizabeth and Mark Mitchell, did not have much money, but their home was rich in patience and warmth. They learned early that Sarah saw the world differently, not through fear or bitterness, but through a deep and uncomplicated love for the things that made her feel safe. One of those things was Johnny Carson. Every night at 11:30, Sarah would pull herself close to the television, sitting so near that her parents worried about her eyes. The Tonight Show was more than entertainment to her, it was comfort. Johnny's voice, his timing, his familiar gestures filled hospital rooms and lonely evenings with something that felt like companionship. Sarah recorded episodes on VHS tapes and replayed them until she knew the jokes by heart. She mimicked Johnny's golf swing, laughed before the punchlines, and spoke about him as if he were a family friend. When she was scared in the dark of a hospital room, Johnny was there, smiling from a glowing screen, making the world feel less heavy. When Sarah was 11, doctors delivered news that her parents had long feared but never truly prepared for. Her heart was failing faster than expected. Surgery was too risky, complications too great. They spoke gently, carefully, but the message was clear. She had months, perhaps a year at most. Sarah listened quietly as adults whispered and cried, and later that night she told her mother something that would set everything in motion. She said she only wanted one thing before she died. She wanted to see Johnny Carson smile at her, just once. After that, she said, she would be ready. Elizabeth Mitchell began writing letters. She wrote to NBC executives, producers, assistants, anyone whose name she could find. She explained who Sarah was, what the show meant to her, and why this one small wish mattered so much. Most letters disappeared into silence. Weeks turned into months, and still Elizabeth kept writing, 47 letters in all. Then, in February of 1983, an envelope arrived bearing the NBC Peacock logo. Inside were 2 tickets to a Tonight Show taping in March, 3rd row, aisle seats. Sarah cried when she saw them, clutching the envelope as if it might vanish. She also revealed a secret she had been working on for months, something she planned to give Johnny if she ever got close enough. It was a book she had made herself, bound with yarn, filled with drawings and words that came straight from her heart. The weeks before the trip were filled with careful preparation. Sarah chose her outfit with seriousness beyond her years, a Sunday dress, white gloves because she wanted to look fancy, shoes polished until they shone. She worked on her gift whenever her strength allowed, coloring slowly, pausing to rest when her breathing grew heavy. Her teacher helped with spelling, but the thoughts were all Sarah's. Every page was a thank you note to the man who had unknowingly kept her company through fear and pain. When the day finally came, Sarah woke before dawn, too excited to sleep, whispering to herself that she was really going to meet him. The drive from Ohio to California was long and exhausting. Sarah barely ate, pressing the wrapped gift to her chest, staring out the window as if afraid the moment might slip away if she blinked. Her lips sometimes tinged blue, a sign her heart was struggling under the strain of excitement. Elizabeth considered turning back more than once, but each time Sarah looked at her with quiet certainty and said this was the best day of her life. By the time they reached NBC Studios, Sarah was tired but glowing, touching the walls as they walked inside, stopping in the hallway to study photographs of Johnny through the decades. She whispered to each image, promising she would see him soon. Inside the studio, the air was cool and smelled faintly of coffee and cables. When Sarah saw the rainbow curtain for the first time, tears filled her eyes. She didn't laugh at the warm-up jokes or chatter with the audience. She just watched the curtain, her breathing shallow, her heart racing. When the lights dimmed and Ed McMahon's voice boomed Johnny's introduction, Sarah stood clapping, crying openly, overwhelmed by the reality of it all. Johnny Carson walked out, smiling, swinging his golf club, and the show began as it always did. He didn't notice Sarah. Not yet. Then came the first commercial break, the quiet pause between laughter and performance. For Johnny, these breaks were sacred routines. He sipped water, adjusted his tie, reviewed notes, and avoided eye contact. He never acknowledged the audience. It was another layer of armor. But this time, something drew his attention. In the third row, a small girl stood on her seat, not waving or shouting, just standing there, tears streaming down her face, holding a brightly wrapped gift and staring at him with an intensity that stopped him cold. Johnny looked away, then back again. There was something in her expression that felt different, something pure and unguarded. When the stage manager called out the countdown, Johnny did something no one had ever seen him do. He walked to the edge of the stage and pointed to her, motioning her forward. The studio fell silent as Sarah made her way down the aisle, clutching her gift like it was the most precious thing in the world. Johnny knelt to her level, his voice gentle as he asked her name. She could barely speak, shaking as she handed him the gift. When he opened it, page by page, the walls he had built over decades began to tremble. He saw himself through a child's eyes, not as a star, but as a source of comfort. He read about hospital rooms, loneliness, fear, and friendship. By the time he reached the final page, his hands were shaking. When Sarah whispered that he had made her whole life worth living, something inside Johnny Carson broke open. The cameras rolled as Johnny pulled her into his arms and sobbed, the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep and long ignored. 15 million people watched as the king of late-night television lost control in a way no one thought possible. When the show returned from break, Johnny tried to apologize, tried to move on, but he couldn't. Instead, he invited Sarah onto the stage, seated her in the guest chair, and let her speak. She told the audience her name, where she was from, and why she had come. When she said she was dying and wanted to meet him before she went to heaven, the studio seemed to stop breathing. Johnny spoke then with a truth rarely heard on television. He admitted he had forgotten why he started the show, forgotten that making people feel less alone was the whole point. He promised Sarah he would call her every week, a promise he would keep in secret. After the show, executives argued, worried the moment was too raw to air, but Johnny stood firm. The episode aired and became one of the most watched in the show's history, but the real story happened away from the cameras. For 6 months, Johnny Carson called Sarah every Thursday night. They talked about school, about episodes she loved, about how she was feeling. He sent gifts, jokes, little pieces of his world. He told no one. When Sarah died on a Thursday morning in September, Johnny made his final call and learned she had passed while watching an old recording of his show, smiling. He never spoke publicly about her again, but her handmade book sat on his desk for the rest of his career, visible to anyone who looked closely. Sarah Mitchell changed Johnny Carson in ways no fame ever could. She reminded him that what he did mattered not because of ratings or applause, but because somewhere, someone was watching and feeling less alone. Sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones we never expect, and sometimes the smallest voices leave the deepest echoes.